So today, technical session number 20. We're gonna be getting into some SOHO routers. We're gonna be talking about some ways that we can secure our routers, setting them up. We're gonna be talking about wireless standards. We're gonna be talking about a bunch of different things. Wireless standards are kind of like the ports. It's things that we need to know for the exam. So in this particular session, we're going to be comparing and contrasting our internet connection types and features. We're going to be going into Wi-Fi networking and standards and encryption. So we're going to start talking about that. Explain the role of a router and describe the differences between a wired and wireless router. Also, we're going to talk briefly about how to install and configure and deploy a SOHO router. SOHO stands for Small Office Home Office. So this isn't going to be one of your big enterprise routers. It's going to be typically what you would see at your house. We're going to be identifying some common pitfalls when installing a SOHO router and some common problems that come up with your routers, and then work through a little bit on how to solve them. Behavior skills and mindsets we're going to want to keep in mind during this particular technical session. Communication. Critical in any team. You need to communicate with your team effectively. You also need to be able to communicate with your supervisors and managers as well as customers. And we use different types of language for each. We're not going to be using the same technical terms we use for our coworkers that we would with our customers, unless we pick up on the fact that they are technically adept. Next, persistence. I mean, I know all of you have learned a lot about that over the last 5 weeks, toughing it out here. Some of y'all have been out of the classroom environment for some time, and now you're getting back into long nights of studying, lots of information being delivered, failing, getting back up, trying again, failing better, getting back up, succeeding. Persistence will help drive this. You can overcome a lot with persistence. And without it, we tend to give up anytime the situation gets tough. And that's not what we want to do here. We want to keep pushing ourselves, keep trying. All right, Madison, can you start us off and let us know what is the internet? Can you read for us, please?
You need somebody to read for you, Kelly?
The internet is a global system of networks that links billions of computers for communicating, sharing information, and resources. It consists of millions of private, public, academic, business, and government networks linked by a broad array of electronic, wireless, and optical networking technologies. Physically, the internet is a huge TCP/IP-based network, a physical mesh topology, and traffic passing through a complex system of routers.
Excellent. Thank you, Madison, and thank you as well, Crystal. I appreciate you volunteering. We will get you on the next one. So, all right. So basically, it's just a huge network of computers talking to each other through routers, and it can be over wireless. It can be over copper wire. It can be over fiber optic, and all this stuff has to work together. So the different types of internet connections that you will see on a pretty regular basis. Dial-up, yes, there are still people who use it. You know, they love that 56K, you know, download speed, 3 hours to upload an email. It's just awesome stuff. Then we can work, yeah, oh yeah. Ironically, I had one of my friends had a cockatiel, which is a little bird, and it used to do the dial-up for the internet. If ever you sat down at the computer, it would do the screeching of the internet modem. ISDN, or Integrated Service Digital Network. also operates over the phone lines. Then you have DSL, digital subscriber line, cable TV, and fiber optic. That's all your wired options. And they're loosely using fiber optic as a wired option because it is running through a cable. Next, wireless, we have satellite, cellular, and it depends on the generation level we're dealing with. You have WiMAX or Wi-Fi, and then you have tethering and mobile hotspots. So these are the primary ways that we would start to interact with the internet on a regular basis. So start with the slowest, oldest, and I guess most legacy of all internet technologies is the POTS, plain old telephone service, or dial-up. It is the least expensive, however, it is also the slowest. It does have its uses with regards to travel, if your broadband goes down, or you're trying to save money. So desktop computers, modem cards provide 2 phone jacks, RJ11 or RJ45. This really is not the case anymore. They typically only provide the RJ45, but you can get adapter cards to fit the RJ11 if you need. It still uses the twisted pair cabling so that there's not a lot of crosstalk. But unlike the RJ45, it operates on 4 wires instead of 8. All right. And this is not the same technology as the DSL. All right. So from here, I need to pause for about 5 minutes. So let me pause it real quick. All right, next technology on our communication list is ISDN, or Integrated Services Digital Network. It supports up to 64 kilobits per second channels, known as B, on a single connection. And the beauty of this one is it can carry voice, video, and data over the same lines. So this was kind of a nice change. This does use the RJ45 connector, unlike the RJ11 of the POTS connection. So we've moved up to the 8-pin connector, but I believe at this time they only used 4 wires in it at this point. They upgrade it later, but currently 4 wires. They had 2 different circuits on it. They had the BRI, which is the basic rate interface, and then they had the primary rate interface. So depending on whether you're using video or voice or data, you would use one of these 2. Next, going back to the POTS line, they actually found a way to kind of upgrade that technology a little bit. So they were able to use the existing telephone wires and push, quote unquote, high speed data transmission over telephone wiring. So it was around this time that they actually shortened the wavelength of your voice over the phone. It used to be that you had a much broader wavelength for your voice. That's why people don't tend to sound the same over the phone as they do in person. They shortened that wavelength a little bit, and in the higher and lower spectrums, they could push data over those lines at the same time as you're using voice. They had a few different variants of it, and the 2 that we need to be aware of is asynchronous versus synchronous, kind of like what we use in here, right? But in here, they're using the term a little bit differently. The asynchronous, or excuse me, let's start with synchronous. Synchronous basically means your upstream and your downstream are the same speed. So if you have a total of 50 megabits of band, or 50 megabits per second bandwidth, you could do 25 up and 25 down. So it maintained the same either way. Problem is, for most people, they're not doing a whole lot of uploading. So we're not pushing a whole lot of stuff up, but we do like to pull a lot of stuff downstream, like streaming videos, games, movies, what have you. So for for the people like that, Asynchronous was a better option. So they would do like an 80-20 rule. So you would have your downstream bandwidth would be, if you had 50 megabits per second, it would be 40 megabits down and 10 up. So you would have an 80-20 rule. So it's asynchronous, it's asymmetrical. It does not operate equally. Synchronous, symmetrical, both sides are pushing the same amount, using the same amount of bandwidth. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
That's what DSL.
Unfortunately, it makes a lot of sense.
All right. Fortunately or unfortunately?
Unfortunately,
Unfortunately.
when you want to stream something to your friends and they're like, "Oh, bro, but when you download the game, it's so fast." I'm like, "Bro, I can't control my upload, man."
Yep. Because you have like 300 down and like 5 up.
Yeah, we always used to. Oh my gosh, we used to have like battles about who had the fastest internet. We're all in the same area.
Yep. And then you had that one friend that was on satellite.
Oh my God, bro. You can't play when it's raining. Ah,
Or, everybody leaves and then 10 seconds later they figure it out. But beyond that, we kind of took a big step up from DSL. DSL works great as well as a backup line. I have a friend, she is a radiologist who works from home. She has a primary internet, very high speed, but she has to have a backup. That was one of the requirements for her working from the house. When COVID hit, she had to have a solid backup in case her primary went down. Since it's medical, they had to be able to get her back up and running immediately. So she had her fiber optic line to the house, but then she also ran a DSL line as well for a backup. After that, we took a big step up. Cable internet, yet again, another repurposing of existing infrastructure we had in place, trying to upscale it, was our cable one. Yes, Brianna.
Sorry to interrupt. I just wanted to get the concept down. Asynchronous means that not everything's working together.
No, asynchronous means it's not like, think of it as symmetrical and asymmetrical. So like if somebody's face is symmetrical, everything on each side is perfectly the same. If it's asymmetrical, like one eye could be blue, the other could be brown. So they're not identical. And this is the same thing here. So synchronous is synonymous with symmetrical. So if you have 50 gigabytes upstream, you're going to have 50 gigabytes downstream, or gigabits, excuse me. So it's going to be the same on both sides for your upstream and downstream flow.
Okay.
Asynchronous, they're trying to use more of the bandwidth because, like, as a consumer, you're going to be, the average consumer is going to be streaming more, watching TV, stuff like that. So they're going to be a lot more downstream, looking at YouTube videos, whatever. So they're going to be pulling information down a lot more than they're going to be sending it up. So they're going to give them like an 80-20 split. So it'll be 80 gigabits down and 20 gigabits up. So they're making them unequal. So they're asymmetrical.
So if you have more downstream, that means the upload speed is better?
No. What it means is you typically you have enough bandwidth in your channel for 100 megabits per second, let's say.
Rivers
and it doesn't matter what direction it's flowing, you can only have 100 megabits per second.
Think of it in rivers like upstream and downstream rivers, but you're all coming from the same it's the same source of water, whether or not it's running down or up.
Yeah,
it's if it's going up, it's coming from the same stream, but if it's going down, it's coming from the same stream, same way.
Yeah. So you only have so much of an area you can push it through.
Yeah.
And so how much percentage of that do you want to allocate downstream or upstream? If it's asynchronous, or excuse me, if it's synchronous, it's equal. So whatever you have coming down, so if you have 100, it's 50 coming down, 50 going up. If it's asynchronous, it's going to be lopsided. It's not going to be the same both ways. So you will have likely 80 coming down and 20 going back up.
Okay, thank you.
So it's like prioritizing your stream, like how much of it you want to allocate to certain things.
Okay, got it.
That's kind of what we're doing. All right, cable lines. Thankfully, these were in place long before cable internet came into play. They were like, all right, we can upscale and use these exact same lines to push a ton of data across. These things are pretty awesome. They were amazing step up from the DSL. They're always connected, meaning they're always up and running. You don't have to necessarily dial in to get it working or something like that. So they're always there. They use pre-existing infrastructure. Big, awesome there. TV signals and PC data signals share the same cable. And then it goes to a cable modem, and then where it screws in using that F-type connector, and then that converts it into a digital, from the digital signal into an analog, so that your PC can handle it. Or excuse me, analog to digital, sorry. Exactly right, but reversed. So your PC, the modem takes the analog signal from the line, switches it to digital, pushes it in your PC. When your PC sends it out, takes the digital signal, switches to analog, pushes it over the cable line. So this is when we actually really started stepping into the high-speed internet era, is when cable modems started coming into play. Any questions so far on that? Well, next step up, my dream of one day being able to live in a place where I can have this, fiber optic lines. Yes, Nassim.
The conversion analog to digital and vice versa didn't apply in DSL. It just started with the cable.
Well, the DSL, yes, the modem would convert it for you, but again, it's running over the lines at higher frequencies than the voice. So, but yeah, I believe, yes, it does happen in the modem, which is a modulator demodulator. So yes, it is.
Okay, thanks.
All right, fiber optics. Big negative on fiber optics, unfortunately, no line sharing. Multi-mode fiber, you can do some stuff with that, but for the most part, no line sharing. You have to have individual fibers running pretty much for each user. It could be multi-mode or single mode. Single mode is our long haul, multi-mode is our short haul. It can be used for anything, television, internet, voice, all that kind of fun stuff. And you get much longer runs per line than you do with cable, than you do with twisted pair. It gives you the longest run. And this is was a big thing when they started running fiber optic across the ocean, because they didn't have to run as many repeaters. And then we got super high speed connections across the ocean rather than using cable or satellite, which had have significantly higher latency or delay. So yes, it does break easier to use. It is significantly more expensive. To give you an idea of how expensive fiber optic is, 20 years ago, when I was in school and we were talking about doing construction in South Florida. I was originally starting out in civil engineering or whatever, and we were at a construction site, and then we were kind of seeing what they were doing, all that stuff. One of the guys who was digging there accidentally cut a fiber optic line. This was 20 years ago, to give you kind of an idea on cost difference. As soon as that fiber optic line was cut, it was $2,000 a minute until that was repaired. That is what the company was charged, $2,000 a minute until they could repair that fiber optic line. So let me ask you a question to sort out the gallery. How much do you think they would be willing to pay a fiber optic repairman to come out and fix that line?
Minimum wage.
Minimum wage. Correct answer is whatever he asked for.
Bank. Just bank. That's what you gotta say.
Because it's instantaneous. Whatever they're doing, they have to drop it and come fix it right now. So the correct answer is whatever they ask for. If he says, I want 20 grand to come fix that fiber optic line, that company's gonna, pay it, because they're not gonna waste more time calling other companies to try to come out and repair it. $2,000 a minute. And that was 20 years ago. What do you think it is today?
Too much.
Yeah. So, because you can't just stick them together and tape it. It doesn't work that way. Copper wire, you can kind of get away with that. You cannot with fiber optics. All right. Other wireless communications, big one is satellite. Now, this is a wonderful thing for rural areas. You don't necessarily have to have the cables running to your phone or your house. You just need to have the dish going on and you're good to go. You can get download speeds around 125 megabits per second. I think Starlink's claims they can beat that. Time will tell, we'll see. But your upload speeds are horrendous. It's like 3 megabits per second. It is super slow. So, you know, for watching TV or downloads and stuff like that, that's really good. But for something like what we're doing now, where I have to be in communication with y'all via video and all that stuff, it would not work. We had a TA when I was first getting started. He was on satellite and it was absolutely hilarious because if anybody told a joke, there was always like a 3 to 5 second delay before it actually hit him and then it responded. So it just seemed like he was slow in the uptake with all the jokes. And there, you know, there was always a delay with questions and stuff like that. So it becomes awkward in conversation. So the big thing with satellite, 2 big frowny faces would be latency or delay. So we just talked about that 3 to 5 second delay. You see that a lot with newscasters and things like that. It seems like they're just, you know, sitting there forever after ask a question and then they respond. That's mostly due to latency with regards to the satellites. And then the other one is the massive sensitivity to weather conditions like Adrian was mentioning before. It's raining at your house. I'm sorry, you can't get satellite today. It's super windy, blowing tree limbs around. No, I'm sorry, you can't get internet today. So you have a lot more things that are out of your control with regards to satellite. Questions so far on this? I get it, Shamil. All right. We'll get into the speed differentials, SK. So when they claim 1 gigabit, they're claiming 1 gigabit of total pipe, like total throughput in optimal conditions. So remember, it's asynchronous. So they count that chunk, even if you're not using it, of upload speed as part of that 1 gigabit. All right. Okay, so cellular communication. We should all be thoroughly familiar with this. Instead of asking who has a smartphone, we might just say, okay, who doesn't have a smartphone? Is there anybody who's just doesn't want to give up the flip phone? They love it. It's awesome. No, nobody wants to give it, you know, everybody still has smartphones. All right, who still has a POTS line in their house? I think we asked this question before. I think it was me and one other person. I do it for storms. Artez, you do? All right. Or do you have a question, Artez? Yep.
I got the pots.
Nice. All right. Solid backup. All right. So over time, cellular has evolved. Early on, the US bet on analog while the rest of the world went digital, which put us several years behind. We're just now getting into like, yeah, we got the payment stuff on our, you know, on our phones and da 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 da. Europe and Asia and a lot of the other countries were doing that back in the early 2000s. They already had this stuff on lock. We're still catching up, but we're getting there slowly but surely. Understand that the G behind that number, you know, the difference between 4G and 5G, it means generation. That doesn't mean gigabytes or gigabits or any of that stuff. It literally means the generation of technology that you're using. When you hit in 4G, then they started putting in what was the LTE or long-term evolution technology. In theory, you could get speeds up to 300 megabits per second downloading and 75 megabits uploading. I would be shocked if anybody ever met somebody who could get that on their cell service on their phone. But that doesn't mean we can't get pretty good speeds. 5G, the new technology that's coming out now, it's mostly in major urban centers at this point, and will be slowly rolling around the country, like rolling out throughout the country. In theory, has the capability to push up to 10 gigabits per second downstream, which is super fast. Questions with regards to this? Yes, Nassim.
But all this is relevant if you want to download movies and things like that on a cell phone, just for talking on the cell phone, regular speech speed. This kind of speed for 5G, I don't think it's relevant.
No, it really, I mean, if you're just using it for talking, no, it's not relevant. But I mean, more and more phones are kind of becoming an extension of ourselves. You know, we have our calendars on there. We use it for social media. We use it for shopping, interacting, calling, all kinds of fun stuff, for good or bad. That is kind of the evolution of the technology, where it's becoming more and more a part of our everyday life. All right. I need to add this picture into my intro to networking one, because I love the way this kind of breaks it down for you a little bit, where you see the PAN, which is that smallest network right here. Then you expand out even more to the LAN, and then even more to the MAN, and then even more to the WAN. So it kind of shows you just comparatively size-wise how these networks kind of fit together, almost like a nesting doll. But it also shows you the standards that govern them. So WAN is governed by the IEEE. I don't know why they put 2, but the IEEE 802.20. MANs are governed by the IEEE 802.16. And this is a series of standards that, you know, govern these types of technologies. PAN, which is that Bluetooth, that's the 802.15. And what we will be focusing on today, for the most part, is the 802.11, which is our Wi-Fi standards. All right, wireless tethering. For the most part, when you think of tethering, you need to think of it in terms as with regards to the 802.11 or the A+, think of it in terms of a wired connection. You would plug your phone and connect it, you know, to the USB in your laptop, and then your laptop would share the cell signal of your phone. This was really, really rough in the start, like when they first started doing this, because if you were using your cell's internet connection or whatever, and you received a phone call, it would cut off whatever you're doing on your computer. It has gotten a lot better than that recently, but you're essentially allowing your smartphone to work kind of like a portable router. And then there's a hotspot, which is typically what you would think of as the wireless form. And that would allow your phone to operate as a router or internet for multiple devices.
Hey, Kelly, sorry. The standards, the 802.11, that
Yes.
is important to know.
Yes, absolutely.
It's just important to know to what, like where it who it belongs to, or what, like.
Oh, we're going to be diving into more specifics on the 802.11 here shortly.
But even what is it? What is the 802.11 called? That's called the standard. Like that's called the.
Yeah, it's the IEEE 802.11 standard, and that governs Wi-Fi communication.
Is it a protocol?
They refer to it as technical standards.
All right.
So But yeah, you could think of it as a protocol as well.
Can you repeat what is a hotspot, please?
A hotspot is essentially it's using your phone more like a wireless router, where you can either have a standalone device, which looks like a little box. Verizon sold one called a Jetpack, and this would use your cellular service, and then you would connect to it via Wi-Fi, and then use a cellular service to communicate. But you can also do the same thing with your phone. It would allow your phone to communicate with multiple devices.
Artez, the standards like the 802.11, 802.15, when you're thinking about it, it's more the company, like the I don't remember it. I thought it was triple E, not double E, Kelly. IEEE.
Yeah, it is triple E.
I triple E. They basically
they won't let me edit the slides. I wish I could.
They're basically giving you different, not versions. It's the same way you would think of generations of LTE, like 4G, 5G, stuff like that. So they'll give you the range and the speed, like your throughput and stuff like that, and they'll change it throughout the years. And depending on the type of network that you have, it'll be a specific one that you have to focus on. I have some down here that I wrote down in the beginning. It's 802.11a. It's like that one was October 1999. So that was the standard for that time, stuff like that. That's how you remember it, or that's how I remember it being explained.
Right.
But Kelly will go into it.
They could change it. You saying like they could be upgraded and stuff?
Yes, it's a standard that is malleable, for lack of a better word.
If you think of these, they're basically, all these are like 3-ring binders full of all the stuff that basically says this is what it needs to be considered this. And yes, it gets updated on a regular basis. So it's like a set of rules or protocols or, what have you, that basically say like, this is what it needs to have to be considered Wi-Fi or an 802.11 standard.
The word protocol is scary, Kelly.
You what?
The word protocol is scary right now because we still have ports that we have to remember.
I got you.
All right, let's get it.
All right. Any questions? No? All right. So, just for a quick review again, IEEE stands for Institute of Electrical and Electronics Engineers. This is a group of people that basically sit around and think of exciting ways to make our lives more complicated. They come together, they write all the protocols, they write all the standards and all that fun stuff that govern the technologies we use. There is a huge laundry list of these. We don't need to know all of these. When you get into Network Plus, they have like about 40 of them or 50 of them that you have to at least know what they are, like 802.2s, link local control, 802.3, CSMA.CD, which is carrier sense multiple assurance, collision detection, token ring LAN, metropolitan area network, all that kind of fun stuff. The only one we're really focused on in the A+ is the 802.11, which we'll talk about here in a little bit. All right, LAN standards. Ethernet is a big one. It is one of the most popular ones used today. Logically, it can be thought of as a bus, but physically it can be a star or a ring or a hybrid. So if you think about it, like we have a bus moving through, at each stop, it may branch off and become a star. It may branch off and become a ring. So logically it's set up almost like a bus, but physically it can be others. The LAN or the Ethernet can be wired or wireless. And it can use copper wire or Wi-Fi. Now, wired Ethernet standards. You may remember these look similar to when we were looking at fiber optics. Do you need to know all these and be intimately familiar with them? No, but you should be able to recognize them and distinguish them from the Ethernet ones. So remember how we talked about earlier, the base in the middle is just short for baseband. All of them have that in the middle. The number on the front, so that 10, is the gigabit speed, or excuse me, the megabit speed that it is communicating on. So you have 10 megabits, and you get up to 100 megabits, then 1,000, and so on and so on. So when you hit 1,000, usually they'll just say like 1 gigabit or whatnot. And then on the end here, we see the X, the FL, the T, 5, the 2, the T. That's the type of technology they're using. So it may be coaxial, it may be twisted pair. So that's where thick net and thin net are. This 2 and this 5, that's coaxial. The T is a, I believe that's phone line. And then you start getting into the fast T when you get 100 and 1,000, that is RJ45 or STP, shielded twisted pair, 8 wires.
So
Question.
Kelly, yes, the numbers, the megabit speed, the letter, the end of it is the technology they're using, like the T, right? And the base stands for, sorry,
Baseband.
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 Thank you.
And almost all of your internet technologies, be them coax, Wi-Fi, twisted pair, fiber optic, will have base in the middle. But I just kind of view it as a way to break up the speed with the technology. All right. And then we get to our wireless Ethernet, where we have the 802.11, A, B, G, N, A, C, and then I believe the most recent is AX that they deal with. And I know you're all excited, so we're going to talk about those too. All right, wired and wireless connectors. So wired, stronger connection, most stable, fastest throughputs, typically copper, fiber optic, and then in the fiber optic, we break it up. Copper takes up coax and twisted pair, fiber optics up, breaks into single mode fiber and multi-mode fiber. And then wireless, we got Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, and infrared. I think they are rolling off infrared from the standards that we need to be aware of, because it is very much a legacy technology that's very rarely used anymore, even with remote controls. But we'll still at least be somewhat aware of it. All right. Crystal, can you read for us, please, about Wi-Fi characteristics? You're hanging out.
Absolutely. Wireless Wi-Fi characteristics. Wireless Ethernet Wi-Fi. Wireless Ethernet networks use radio waves to communicate. The wireless networks used today are based on the IEEE 802.11 Ethernet standard, marketed as Wi-Fi. Wireless networking is the area of networking with fastest ascent over the last years. Understanding Wi-Fi characteristics and installation/configuration is essential for every network technician/administrator.
Excellent. Thank you so much. So yeah, I mean, over the last 10 years, we went from barely using this technology to, it's become an integral part of pretty much everyday life. You know, everything is connected to the internet. I always ask the question as to why. Why do I need a Wi-Fi toaster? I don't know. Why does my dryer need to be Bluetooth capable? Don't know. You know, but we're connecting all of these things. You know, I can understand auto shut off, but you know, for other reasons, you know, over the last few months, we learned why they had internet connected thermostats so that they could go in and turn them off for you just in case you know, didn't want to do it yourself. But smart home controls, yes. So they are connecting anything and everything they can, which is wonderful. Why we now have the IP version 6, so each individual person can have up to 4 billion unique IP addresses to themselves. So Wi-Fi frequencies and channels. For the moment, we're going to focus on the 2.4 gigahertz range. Now, Wi-Fi can operate on 2.4, 5, and now the 6 gigahertz range. And within each of these, there are frequencies. We tend to refer to them as channels, which the wireless devices can operate. Now, the problem comes in is if two people are talking on the same channel, you get a lot of crosstalk. You get a lot of intermittent connection errors, things like that. So to avoid any kind of interference with nearby access points, we need to try to use frequencies that overlap, or that do not overlap, excuse me. You know, like if you live in apartment buildings, this is a really big thing in apartment buildings, you know, where you have a whole bunch of Wi-Fi routers near each other. Unfortunately, they would talk over each other, and it could be hard to try to find a channel or a signal that you can operate on. On the 2.4 gigahertz band, you only have a total of 14 channels. 14, that's all we get. And all of them overlap, as you can see, like this. So in order to avoid any kind of overlap, we always need to use channels 1, 6, and 11. Yes, you need to remember that. Channels 1, 6, and 11, because that is the 3 that have 0 overlap. Now, if you want to be the really mean person in your building, you can set yours to channel 3 or channel 8, and then you eat up 2 channels. Please don't be that person. Yes, Ramon.
I was gonna ask, so is that why like most like newer buildings, the Wi-Fi is like very low when you're like from your apartment to like in the hallway, it's very low to stop the crosstalk from others that may have Wi-Fi as well?
Well, there's two reasons for that. One would be signal strength. So yes, likely whoever installed your Wi-Fi doesn't want your Wi-Fi extending 3 apartments over, because then you're just opening yourself up to risk of them eventually getting into your Wi-Fi. So they'll turn down the power of the antenna to try to keep the signal inside your apartment area. And the other maybe if it's concrete walls, and the concrete walls have metal rebar in them, that also could be dampening the signal as it's going through. So, but yeah, there is a high likelihood that they're turning down the signal to kind of minimize that crosstalk. Because there's an old, not many people do it nowadays, but there's an old hackers thing that they would do. It's called war driving. It's where you go around and you start looking for open Wi-Fi signals. So you start looking for Wi-Fi, you know, channels or whatever that they have not put passwords on, and then they'll literally write down on the sidewalk or on the side of the building the SSID of that Wi-Fi signal, so that anybody driving by sees it, can go ahead and log into that. Or if they're able to crack your password, they'll even put your password out there too. So it's not something that's done as much nowadays, but I would say late 90s, early 2000s, yes. People are a little bit more aware about passwords and stuff today. So channels 1, 6, and 11. You can set up pretty good spread of antennas, even in a 3-dimensional environment, without overlapping using these 3 channels. Yes, Ninja.
So can we manually choose these things in our own,
Excellent question. Yes, you can. So you can manually log into your router and select which channels you wish to use.
can we extend the antenna like you said?
What, increase the power of it?
Yep.
To a point, yes.
Oh, thank you.
So yeah, I mean that, but you know, if you're in a house, typically it's already at max power. If you're in an apartment, they may have turned it down. Typically, standard setting. All right, questions on this? Oh, we haven't even gotten to security yet, Casey. All right. All right, so here's some of the characteristics. Again, primarily dealing with the 2.4 and 5 on this gigahertz bandwidth. Now, the thing to take into account when we're doing this is the A, B, and C does not mean it's improving each time. These are when these standards were submitted. So A and B, standard 802.11a and 802.11b, were submitted close to the same time. However, B was the first to market. And they were the first one pushing their bandwidth or their standard out there. And so they were the most adopted. So 802.11a operates off of the 5 gigahertz bandwidth, which has a broader variety of channels that you can use. And it was able to get as high as 54 megabits per second, which is pretty darn good. You know, as one of the first technologies out. But they were much slower to market. So 802.11b got to market first. They operated off of the 2.4 gigahertz bandwidth, which is what we were talking about over here. That's the one with the 14 channels, and we need to use 1, 6, or 11. And they only had speeds as high as 11 megabits per second. But again, first to market, most widely adopted. So it was of the 2, A and B were hands down the more popular of the 2. Eventually, we upgraded to 802.11g. And if you're sitting here thinking, do I need to know this? The answer is yes. So next to my ports, my printers, my RAID arrays, this was something I wrote down every day. The standard, the speed, and the band. So did it operate off of 5, at 54 megabits, 802.11a. So we do have a slide near the end where you can kind of capture it all in one. But yes, this is something you do need to know. Moving on to 802.11g, support speeds as high as 54 megabits per second. Congratulations. After a little bit of time, they finally caught up to the first standard of the other guy. So 802.11g also operates on that 2.4 gigahertz bandwidth. And it offered a fun little add-on. It was backwards compatible. So remember that. It was backwards compatible with B. So you didn't need to buy all new devices. The old 802.11b technology would work with the new 802.11g bandwidth. The only problem is there's one really big caveat with the backwards compatibility. Devices all have to communicate at the same speed. So if you introduce an 802.11b device to an 802.11g network, it slows everything down to 802.11b because we all have to talk at the same speed. So if you're sitting there thinking like, yeah, we upgraded everything and we're supposed to be getting all this speed, but it's still working just the way it used to. Likely somebody had an 802.11b antenna and we're still communicating on it, and it brings the whole network down. Questions?
So why these are not made with like a midway buffer to what would be the next iteration in the line, like close to the next minimum? So like it's 11, why wouldn't they make it at least, you can go up to 30 if you jump to the new version?
I honestly, I believe that's because they need to make the difference substantial enough to where it's worthwhile for them to jump to the next one.
Yeah, Ramon, don't you know that we're never good with when it comes to implementing new stuff, bro?
So
Yeah,
agreed.
but
Tech we're talking about, brother.
But again, like this is like some of the first backwards compatibility, and it was just so that they could market it better, you know, for the older technology, because back in at this time, since it was a newer technology, the stuff was expensive.
Oh yeah, Kelly,
So
you
go
don't
on.
have the years next to it. Yeah, Ramon, this is like 1999 to 2003.
Yeah.
It's a little older, so it was very new.
You know, and it's the equipment you're using is very expensive compared to what it is today. And if you have to replace it on, you know, 30 computers, it adds up really quick. So the backwards compatibility allowed to extend the life. Unfortunately, again, when you introduce older tech, it slows it down. That's the main thing you got to be aware of. Getting a little bit better when we get into 802.11n. This now operates on both 2.4 and 5. Pretty awesome stuff. You know, also backwards compatible. But they were able to achieve much higher speeds because they were able to use multiple antennas. And this is where we started implementing what's called MIMO technology. So you see those routers where it looks like an upside down spider. They got all the antennas sticking up from the bottom of them and all that stuff. You know, that's MIMO in action. So that's multiple antennas for transmission and reception, multiple input, multiple output. So MIMO. Not to be confused with S-MIME, which is for what?
Email encryption.
Email.
Email encryption. Very good. Very good.
Yo, Brianna. Yo.
So
You
MIMO.
always answer.
Multiple input, multiple output. They're also able to use things called channel bonding, which is they're taking multiple channels and utilizing them all at the same time. So it allows a much heavier throughput, gets speed ratings up to 130 to 150 megabits per second. That is significantly faster than its predecessors.
So you'd be able to identify a MIMO router based on the antennas?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, now they're kind of using the antennas internally in the device, but for a while there, they're all external, and still a lot of them you will see.
Okay.
But you can see, like, if you were looking at a series of routers coming through, you know, like from oldest to newest, you would see instantly where MIMO was implemented, because you would go from like one antenna or two to all of a sudden you have like 8 on a single device.
Yeah. Okay.
All right. So 802.11 AC. Yes, Nassim.
So my question is like this. We talk about speeds over here. This is the speed towards the receiving computer, or is the speed towards the provider, from the provider to the router?
This is the total throughput that the router itself can handle.
Which is coming from the ISP, and then it's being...
Doesn't matter if it's coming from the ISP or if it's computers internally talking to each other. So it's the total throughput that router can handle. So, you know, if I have like 20, if I'm setting up a LAN party at my house, you know, and all the, you know, the computers are talking to each other, it doesn't matter what's coming in from the outside. It can only handle 130 to 150 megabits per second.
Nassim, I think
Yeah.
you're probably thinking about it like, you know how when you have internet, you have a certain speed that you're given. You can have whatever speed the provider gives you, but your router, if it runs on an earlier generation of the LAN standard, it's not gonna run that fast. It's not gonna be allowed to do so because it doesn't have the capabilities. So if it has the 802.11 AC standard, it could run that, it could run at, you know, the fast speeds that we have right about now. But like the older standards, if you're running like a fast speed on that router, it wouldn't work. It would just run to the fastest as was available to what your router could handle. So it's not the internet per se, it's the router standard. If I made that make sense, Kelly.
No, I mean, it seems like you're doing good. I mean, but
So on the receiving end, on your computer, the final all this data eventually has to come to your computer, host, call it whatever you want. So on your computer, how does it work with receiving speed? Has to do with the Ethernet card, has to do with anything else? If it's wireless, like a laptop connected in a small office, a small home, how does it work with the speed that is able to process and pass it down into your computer?
Yeah,
to
but I
your
mean,
application.
so think of it this
to
way.
your
So like if I go to my internet provider and they give me 300 megabits per second, but I have a router that's only capable of handling 50 megabits per second, all we would ever see through the house is the ability to handle 50 megabits per second because we've created a bottleneck or just a tight little spot where, you know, all the water or, you know, information that's flowing to us has to slow down to go through that thinner pipe. But
and
this,
if the router is strong enough, fast enough to process everything from the ISP and
yes.
send it to your computer, is there bottleneck on the computer itself? Is there on the receiving point of the computer? Is there any the device can process such a speed or
Yeah, I mean, well, I mean, if your antenna on your computer is not able to handle that high speed, the antenna would be the bottleneck on your computer. So if your modem on your computer is not able to handle that high of a throughput, then your modem would be the bottleneck, yes. But typically that's not the case with the way that routers and Wi-Fi and all that fun stuff is getting today. Typically the bottleneck is your ISP at the moment. So, but we'll keep talking about it. We'll keep working through it.
Yeah,
all right. So we got 802.11n. Next, we go to 802.11 AC. Speed jumps significantly again. Almost by a factor of 10. So this one only operates on the 5 gigahertz bandwidth. And it allows for more spatial streams, so it's able to transmit the information a lot faster. It can bond up to 8 channels at a single time, which is really awesome, giving you much more robust throughput. And then if MIMO wasn't enough, they now have multi-user MIMO. So we can have more people on a single router than we could before. Because with just straight MIMO, or a lot of times with Wi-Fi, the problem is only one person can talk at a time. So everybody has to wait until everybody's done talking, and then you can talk. So only one device could talk on a time. So with the implementation of this, you now are able to have more devices talking all at the same time, speeding up the communication process and the throughput out of your network. All right. Questions on this? The last one, which is not on here, is 802.11ax, which this is sometimes referred to as Wi-Fi 6. This one uses the 2.4 gigahertz, the 5 gigahertz, and now the 6 gigahertz.
All three of them? All three?
Yep, all three. And if I'm not mistaken, they can get about, in theory, I think it's like 40 gigabits per second. So pretty crazy the speed that you can get on that one. So 2.4, 5 gigahertz, and 6. This is also known as Wi-Fi 6.
Kelly.
Yep.
So 802.11 AC uses 1 gigabyte per second.
It allows for a throughput of up to 1 gigabit per second. Remember, small b is bit, big B is byte. You always gotta pay attention to that.
All right, gigabit.
1 gigabit per second, and it operates off of the 5 gigahertz bandwidth. A lot of gigs in this.
AX is wow.
Yes. I'm actually looking to buy a Wi-Fi 6 router pretty soon, and I'm really excited about that. So, and I believe A+ goes as high as AX. That is where they top off at, I believe. Yeah, small b bits, big B bytes. Whenever you see it notated.
Doesn't that same rule apply to other letters or for other things? Like the lowercase and the big and the uppercase?
I would assume, yeah.
But like I'm gonna think about it. Give me a second.
It's got to be something metric. So, all right. So with that, kind of cruise on a little bit. Other Wi-Fi characteristics that we need to kind of be aware of. One is ad hoc mode, which is also called peer-to-peer mode. This is a nice technology, but the problem is it also is a massive risk in using security-wise. So with each wireless node, you can have direct contact with each other. So you essentially turn your Wi-Fi antenna to openly communicate with other computers. These tend to work pretty good in small groups to transfer files, share printers, all that kind of fun stuff. You typically use Bluetooth. However, from a security perspective, if somebody can use ad hoc mode to link into your computer, if you leave this door open, they now are able to communicate over your network if you're at work, utilizing your credentials. So anything they can push through your computer, they're going to be piggybacking off of your credentials on your network. So be very, very cautious of this if you do utilize ad hoc mode. All right, infrastructure mode. This is where you're using one or more WAP. What does WAP stand for?
Wireless access point.
Thank you very much. All right, wireless access point. So if you're using one or more WAP and you want to create a wired network segment, infrastructure is better, you know, kind of works better for this. So you can use dedicated resources such as like your internet connection, stuff like that. This also works if you're setting up a wireless mesh network, you need to have one that is essentially in control of all the others, because you don't want to go around programming each individual access point every time you change a password. So you want to basically change the settings on a singular WAP, and then it will push all of that information out to all the other access points. So. All right. So when we're communicating over wireless, how do we make sure our data is secure so people's not, you know, looking at what we're sending? They're not looking at our bank statements. They're not checking to see, you know, if they can get into our accounts or, you know, access our company's records or any of that fun stuff. Well, we had to start implementing wireless encryption. So the first one they implemented was WEP, Wired Equivalent Privacy. This uses a static 40 or 104-bit key. Static, meaning it does not change. Problem is, any decent hacker can cut through this in about a minute or two. This is a fully hacked protocol. It's better than nothing, but just barely. So this is like one of the first renditions of encryption in wireless. Easily broken at this point, but if you're in an environment where it's the most you can use, at least it's better than nothing. People can't just sit there and watch your transmissions with Wireshark over open airways. So the very nature of using a static key is the weakness here. It doesn't change with each of the transmissions. All right, after that, we had to move on, get something a little bit better. So we moved to what's called WPA, or Wi-Fi Protected Access. And this, instead of using a static encryption key, it is using a dynamic key. So a new key is generated for every single packet that is sent over the internet. But the thing is it requires the user to authenticate who you are before the keys are exchanged. You're doing a key exchange here. That is network plus level, but just think of it as, you know, you have to have a means to lock and unlock the message to encrypt it. So one person locks it with a key, the other person unlocks it, but the person needs to verify who they are. And we use certain types of servers to authenticate, or we will use something like TKIP, which is a temporal key integrity protocol. Temporal meaning time. So the keys they are giving you are only valid for a certain amount of time. So this gives you a little bit more protection than WEP. Still not great, but it's getting better. It may require the use of an authentication server like TACACS or Kerberos, which you'll probably see mentioned in your books. I think TACACS is military and Kerberos is more of an enterprise server, just to kind of make sure you are who you say you are and you're allowed to have access to what you're trying to connect with. Questions on this? You don't need to have to do a deep dive. Just the main takeaways here is WPA is better than WEP, and it is associated with TKIP, which is that temporal key integrity protocol. WEP is static key. WEP or WPA, excuse me, is a dynamic key, meaning the key changes every time a packet is sent. It's constantly changing. It's dynamic. Yes, Babukar.
Is double PA, is it like when banks send you an email and then they'll have to send you like a code that you can enter and use for a certain period of time so you can get it?
That's going to be a little
into
more,
the
that's a
email?
little closer to S-MIME,
Yes, man. Okay.
where you're encrypting an email and then decrypting it.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Mhm. Now we get to where encryption gets a little more robust, a little more, effective. We get into WPA2. And this utilizes what's called AES, which is the Advanced Encryption Standard. And this uses a 128-bit block cipher that is significantly tougher to crack than the previous key system with WPA. If you're using centralized servers, again, this would utilize things like TACACS and Kerberos in order to authenticate you. So these are servers that are verifying who you are. And in personal mode, you would use a pre-configured password, or instead of the centralized server, and this is referred to as a PSK, or pre-shared key. So basically, anybody who needs to access it, decrypt it, they would have a passcode in order to decrypt that device in personal mode. Questions with regards to this?
This would be in the configuring SOHO router section of the book.
Is this what? Yeah, this should be in your SOHO router section. Yes.
Okay.
So yeah, uses WPA2, most secure, uses AES. Enterprise level requires a authentication server like TACACS or Kerberos. Private and personal mode, you need to use a pre-shared key, essentially a password. Here's a quick snapshot of it. I think we have a cleaner one at the end, but if you want to take a shot of this, kind of sums up a lot of the stuff real quick.
Wait, I thought the range. Whoa, what did I write down?
Well, range would be how far from the antenna you could be.
Yeah, I was thinking about range as the frequency, like as
Yeah,
in,
no. Frequency, yeah, 5, 2.4, 2.4, 2.4, and 5, 5, and then 2.45 and 6 or AX.
But when you speak about the frequencies, like can't
You could say,
use the
yeah,
word,
frequency range, yeah.
Kelly,
yeah.
these books are getting me. Hey, Kelly, I'm not liking this, man. Francis, I don't, this is not even 1102. This is 1101. 1102, I'm starting to think is okay. It's just because the command line and stuff is,
Again,
what I realize is 1101, or just core one in general, is a lot of information, but a lot of it you can handle if you're using it across each thing. Like a lot of it basically pours over into the next thing.
Yes.
But like core 2 is a small amount of information with a lot of things that you can do with it.
Yes, but it's focused more on practical application.
Yeah. I'm not liking this, bro.
It's not as bad as you think.
It's not that, Kelly. Listen here, man. It's just if we have to go through all of this. Oh, I gotta take 1101 and get this over with before I start.
The raw memorization is mostly in 1101. The more hands-on working with things, getting that kinesthetic experience where you're like, getting to work with the stuff, then that's 1102, and it's a little bit more, like, I guess, easier to absorb.
You would probably do better studying for 1101
Yeah.
studying for
Yeah, I
1101 than
think
you would
mine is flipped
for,
now.
yeah. You would study
Could
better
definitely do two.
using the textbook for 1101, but using test out would be better for studying 1102.
Perfect analogy. Yes.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
Perfect analogy. Yeah, and 1101 was like right up my alley. It was just brute force memorization. I do that pretty easily. And so I was able to do really well in 1102. I struggled because it was a little more hands-on stuff, and I didn't have any hands-on experience. So
Rachel, why you letting him do this to us?
I told you, what were the three requirements of any TA?
Rachel is one of a kind. I don't want to hear it.
I agree with that statement. She is one of a kind.
This is what you need. You need this.
I
Be
mean,
okay.
honestly, I kind of feel like Adriel's right on the mark. I almost want to just, I don't know, do something.
It's
Like, this is
because
getting to me-
I've been studying 1101 material for so long, just because that's where my strong suit is. But then I'm starting to realize that it doesn't even matter when, like, for practical application, whether or not I know what the connectors are, if for most of the time I'm going to be using an interface to be doing stuff as an IT tech.
Well, I mean, it depends on the type of IT tech you are, honestly.
I mean, I wanted to be a repair tech in the first place. So I guess 1101 is why I wanted to, is studying 1101 came easier for me, but it's just a lot of stuff now I'm realizing.
Well,
and
remember,
I was
this
scared
is
for
peak
1102.
week. This is peak week. So you guys are at the top of the mountain right now.
I'm about to start logging in on my laptop in my bed, honestly.
It does get easier, I promise. And we will get time to
does.
practice.
And knowing this information also helps you to troubleshoot as well.
Correct.
Babu,
Did you
do you have a
Babu?
question?
Nope. Okay. So
I got a question. Sorry.
yes, Artez.
Pardon me. WPA2 is, you say it runs with TKIP? TKIP runs with it?
WPA2 operates with AES, Advanced Encryption Standard. TKIP is WPA.
Yes. You were saying that. So let me do something real quick. You said it run with Advanced Encryption Standard. Got a 128 block
Cipher, 28-bit block cipher.
Block cipher, right? It's harder to
You don't need
crack.
to really know what that is at this point. Just understand
Nah,
that that's what's there.
Right, I just put it down. I ain't even. So it's harder to crack. Is using a password or PSK of centralized server, referred to postal mode, and then it was one more. You were saying something.
I think I was going through, I think it was Security Plus I was going through, where they were talking about how the encryption and decryption process works. And it turned my brain to mush for like a week.
They use the same process making the CompTIA questions. That's how they word the questions. They run them through an encryption process.
Yeah, there you go. That's funny. All right. So clipping along here, we got a little bit of time. Talk about it. So the primary role of the router is to allow communication between networks. So the router connects networks together. It could be multiple internal networks connected through a series of routers, or it could be your internal network connected to the external internet. And it typically controls the flow of data, and it makes forwarding decisions based upon the IP address. So this is a layer 3 device looking at IP addresses and communicating that and figuring out which way it needs to go. How it makes those forwarding decisions, it uses something called routing tables. And these tables are updated depending on the type of router pretty regularly. And it's basically them communicating with whoever's connected to them and basically saying like, who do you talk to? And then it kind of extends further and further out. So they talk to their neighbor, like, I would talk to Rachel and say, you're like, okay, well, who are you connected to? And Rachel would be like, okay, well, I'm connected to DW. It's like, okay, if I need to talk to DW, I need to go through Rachel. So it sets up routing tables essentially to figure out how it's going to forward this information along. At our house or at our homes, it allows home users to share cable or DSL internet. So multiple people can use the same internet line. So you have one line coming in and 10 people on the other side can be sharing that single line in. Just like we were talking about with NAT or network address translation, where our company was assigned one IP address, we could have 50 people inside communicating, all sharing that one IP address on the outside. All right. Essentially, for the most part, the internet itself is just a series of routers all connected together. And you can utilize smaller versions like this, which obviously this is a really old one, for homes and small offices, all the way up to very large enterprise models like this that you have a lot more control over and have a lot more capabilities. All right. So we talked about a WAP. We know what a WAP is. It's wireless access point. For the most part, when they are mentioning WAP, they're speaking on something that is just a Wi-Fi antenna. That's all it does. Typically when they're speaking of it just as a WAP, all it is an antenna. And this connects a bunch of wireless devices together the same way a hub would connect a bunch of wired PCs. All right. Now, if we're installing a bunch of these WAPs into the ceiling, they all need power. And we don't want to run a power line to every single spot that we have one of these. That gets really annoying. There's all sorts of regulations you have to deal with. It's pretty aggravating. So they invented something kind of neat. PoE, or Power over Ethernet. Just as we can push data over a cable line, we can also push power over that same line. They've been doing this with phone lines forever. So you use what's called a PoE injector, and you plug it in, and it pushes 110 voltage through your internet line. And that allows you to power these wireless access points that are connected in the ceiling without running a separate power cord for every one. It makes life so much easier. The only downside is when you do that, you have to remember that these internet cables are hot, so they are carrying electricity.
Yeah, I was just about to ask you that. When you're running power, doesn't that doesn't affect the data transfer?
Nope.
That's all right. Well,
and then there's the flip side of this coin, which we talked about earlier in this class, which is EOP, which is Ethernet over power. If we can push power over a data line, we can also push data over a power line.
well,
If you live in an apartment and it's hard to get good Wi-Fi, Ethernet over power is awesome. As long as you don't go through a breaker box, you get essentially hardline speeds without running Ethernet lines through your entire house. It's amazing stuff. I actually use it here. On any device where I need high-speed connections, I run EOP to it. So you can run both data and power over the line simultaneously, and they don't really interfere with each other.
Where does the modulation happen? If the wire is transferring 110 volts, how do you modulate to lower volts as a signal, 1 and zeros?
Well, you would need a device that is PoE capable. So the modulation would actually happen inside the device. So the device, you know, you couldn't just plug it into any old device and hope to power it, Nissim. That's a really great question. But you would, you know, when you're picking up a wireless access point or something like that, you would need to see, you know, it would say on the box, PoE capable. So power over Ethernet capable. Otherwise, you would have to run a power line to it.
So in the same wire, you have 110 volts passing, and then also different volts or different
Well, data and then the voltage.
data on the same wire.
Typically, I believe with PoE they use, I think they use wires two. They use two wires for power, and they don't typically use those also for data. So if you get the 8 wires, I think they use 2 of them for power. Now, Ethernet over power, they need a device that actually separates that signal out. Questions? I mean, you don't need to really get into the mechanics of it. Just understand that PoE is pushing power over your data lines to help power up your internet devices so you don't have to run electricity to all of them.
Kelly, the PoE, I think they use 8 wires, right? And they both deliver both power and data at the same time.
Yes, they push both power and data over the internet, over the Ethernet lines. Yes.
Okay.
Everybody got quiet today.
Just tired.
Just tired, and it's Wednesday. Y'all had like a vacation day yesterday. Got to hang out and curl up with a good book, like, you know, the A+ manual, and work on test out all day. It was all kinds of good stuff. All right, so routers, for the purpose of this class, we'll be focusing more on SOHO routers, which stands for small office or home office router. These are multifunction devices like we talked about in Intro to Networking. It does basically everything. It's a router, it's a switch, it's a gateway, it's a bridge, it's a DHCP server, a wireless access point, and it does NAT. It's everything all in one. And when something does everything all in one, it doesn't do all of those things awesomely. So it's good enough for home use, not great for enterprise level. We need to step up to something more robust for that. But for our small businesses working in our homes, almost always takes care of our needs. This basically stands between you and the internet. So this connects your home network to the larger internet. So we will talk a little bit more and get some practice configuring routers. If you have not configured your router at your home, which I'm going to take a stab and say most have not, because that's general practice, this is something you do need to go in and do, because if you haven't, your router is pretty much wide open, because that means that your router is now operating off of its generic sign-in and password, which I'm not sure if you guys are aware. Find it real quick. If you don't know what your router password is, so I can find it here.
You just use admin. I mean, use the admin password.
Oh, they don't usually make it that easy.
Some of these routers, they come
But
default.
let me go ahead and throw this up here. So if they actually have a website just dedicated to default passwords for routers. So let's go to, let's go to Xfinity here. See if they have one here. good one. But you just find whatever router you have. And you can go with Nokia. Run a search, and it will tell you the brands of Nokia or the models, and then it will tell you the protocols they operate off of, the generic username, and the generic password for each of the routers. You can look this up for any router. So this is out there. So if you have not changed the password and sign in for your home router, this is not the same thing as your Wi-Fi network. When you come in and you want to connect to, you know, Kelly's home network, and here's my password. This is not the same thing as your router. The router is where all the settings are stored. So if somebody comes into your home or near your house and they know you have Xfinity, they can pretty much guess which router you have. They can go in here, get the generic sign-in and password, and if you have not changed that, they then own your network. They can set up and do whatever they want. So your homework for tonight, if you have never done this, is to log in your router and change the basic sign-in and password for your router. Is it who's now concerned?
Kelly, I want to share something real quick.
Go for it, Babukar.
Can I share my screen?
Yes, absolutely. Let me stop sharing here real quick. Give me 1 second. I got to enable it.
Oops.
There you go. You're good now.
Okay. Okay, this is my router at home right now. And last week I got into the router and I was trying to change the settings. See right here, it shows low security.
Yep.
So I thought it was something that's not good. So I went in there and then changed it to high security.
Got really
maximum. I chose this maximum security, and guess what? I didn't have cable for 2 days.
You what?
I didn't have cable for 2 days. It just, I don't know. The internet was fine, but no cable. I don't know what happened. I called the cable company. They tried to troubleshoot over the phone. They did everything possible.
Yeah.
Nothing. For 2 days, they could not figure it out. And then they said they were going to send me a technician. But within that period of time before the technician got here, I was able to get back to whatever I was doing. And I'm like, okay, you know what? Maybe I should change this back to low security. And as soon as I changed it, the cable started working. I'm like, wow, that's crazy.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to share that. Like sometimes you might not want to touch things that you don't know how they operate because it will mess up everything for you. So that was a lesson for me. I'm like, okay, I'm not gonna do it again. So, but at least I've learned from it. I know that I should not change the security settings from,
Well, you can, but you need to be aware of what it's doing. And that's usually what happens. People they're like, oh, I got a firewall. I'm going to put that firewall on maximum. And then they're getting dinged like every 30 seconds, every time your computer's trying to do everything. You're like, wow, this is really annoying. And then they go the other extreme and just turn everything off. So, you got to find that happy medium in what you're trying to accomplish. But, with regards to this, with the router thing, I actually have a website that is a router emulator. So you can go around and play with settings and do something like that. You can literally pick which type of router you want to emulate, and you can go in and see how the settings are adjusted and all that kind of fun stuff. It kind of gives you some way to kind of get some hands-on with it. There's a few labs, but if you want to see what your router looks like before you go playing around with it, this is a good website to do that with. But again, I'll put that in. I will put that in Slack, excuse me. Does anybody know how to figure out how to connect to their router? Does anybody know how to do this? How do you connect to your router?
Do you type in your IP address on your browser?
Type in what?
You type in an IP address on your browser?
Yeah, you do type in an IP address on your browser. How do you get that IP address? What IP address are you talking about?
At the back of your router?
You might be able to get it on the back of your router.
Or just type 192.168.1.0 or
only for certain routers. Only for certain routers. Francis says use IP config or IF config if you have a Mac.
Yeah,
so I type in IP config and it gives me a bunch of stuff. What should I be looking for when I type in IP config for my router? What is that called?
Default gateway.
Default gateway. So you go in, you hit your command line, go into your command line or your terminal, you type in IP config or ifconfig if you have a Mac. And then when it pulls up and it gives you your default gateway, write down that IP address, open up any web browser and just type in that IP. And that will take you to the login screen for your router. Once you get there, it's going to ask you for a sign-in and password. That website that I just showed you, which I will also put in Slack, will give you the generic sign-in and password for your router to allow you to sign in the first time. And then from there, you can change your password. Windows, you go to the command line, Brianna, CMD, and then you type in IP config for Windows. And then you're going to change your sign-in and password for your router to at least give you that level of security. If you do not have even that, basically anybody who can get onto your Wi-Fi can log into your routers, change whatever they want, and then they pretty much own your systems.
You said CMD?
CMD, like command, CMD. Put that in the search bar and it'll bring up command line. Or the command prompt, excuse me. Here's the frustrating thing. If you deal with internet service providers, if you call in because of an issue with your router, the first thing they're going to ask you to do is reset all the settings on your router, which means you have to re-put all that stuff in again. This is my frustration with Comcast. If I have a particular issue, they won't even let me talk to a technician until I've reset all the settings on my router. It's the most frustrating thing you can think of. But again, we need to do this for the security of our networks.
That's what I went through too. I went through like 100 restarts. Like they keep rebooting the router. It would not solve the problem. The internet is fine, but what I'm having trouble with is the cable. So, and they would not want you to talk to a technician. They would say, okay, we're gonna send a ticket out. I said, man,
it's frustrating.
Help me figure this out.
Put me on the phone with a human. I will explain to them what's going on. All right. So inside your router, you can do all sorts of fun stuff. You can set, you can take care of network address translation. You can even do subnetting on your own home network if you really want to practice with that. Again, side note, not an A+ standard. It was just a preview of network along with some help to get through the Coursera labs. They typically are equipped with universal plug and play, or as they like to call it, plug and play. Additional services, they got firewalls in there, which depending on the severity that you put in place can really disrupt your day, as Babacar just stated. But you can also use the list. What's the name of the list? Who remembers?
You mean the access list?
The access. We're missing a word.
Link.
No.
Control.
Wait.
There we go. Access control list. Who's allowed access, who's not. So you can set it up as an allow list or deny list as you see fit, but you can do a lot of that stuff from your router settings as well. And this would control it for your whole network rather than individual devices. Like if you did it on Windows Defender Firewall, it only works for that device. This would do that for the entire network. And quality of service, or QoS. This allows you to prioritize communications across your network. From, something that is high priority, like what we're doing now, video, voice over IP, that would be high priority because you don't want it getting all pixelated and breaking up, right? All the way down to a best effort, which would be like you sending an email. Does it really matter to you if an email arrives 3 seconds later? Not typically. So that would be a best effort for quality of service. So you can actually institute priorities on different types of communications. And you could do it by machine. You can do it by communication type. So if you want, your device to have priority and set it up to where like, the device in my office should get 60% of all available bandwidth and everybody else can fight over the 40% left. You can go in and set these up, not necessarily on a SOHO router, but larger routers, yes. So you can give devices priority as well as types of communication. All right, steps are pretty basic for setting up a router. Try to put it in a centralized location because you're using a Wi-Fi antenna and it's an omnidirectional, which means it goes everywhere, goes out like a donut. You want to cover the most amount of space in one shot, connect it to an AC power supply, hook up any needed network cables, you start up your PC, and then log into the router. Manufacturer's instructions should give you the generic sign-in and password, and then you can configure your settings, update your firmware, all that fun stuff. So what's our homework for tonight?
Mess with the router.
No, don't mess with it. Configure
A little more specific than that.
You gotta kill me, right?
You're gonna be out of internet if you mess with it.
You're gonna be calling Babacar like, yo, bro.
I'm telling you.
No.
Configure your router. At the very minimum, give yourself a secure sign-in and password. That is my homework for you is to log into your router and give yourself a secure sign-in and password at the very minimum. And then I'm going to give you a router emulator and then the router password list websites. And you can go look up your router by model and make and play around with the settings in the emulator and see what it does. So. All right. Here we go. After this, so once you get your router plugged in, you start getting things configured, sign in password, you can set up your SSID broadcast, which stands for Service Set Identifier. That's the name of your Wi-Fi network. If you want it to be, Kelly's home network, or, unknown network or whatever. You can call it whatever you want, just something that you can identify it. And what it does is it broadcasts that name out to everybody. And it announces the network is there. So you just kind of cast that name out there so people can see it. If they're trying to log into a Wi-Fi, if they can, then they click on it. And then you can put in your password in order to get into it. You can turn off the broadcast setting where it does not broadcast your network name out there. So if the user is not authorized to access the network, they will have a harder time. This is touted as a security setting, but I put it as a tentative, not really, because if somebody has a Wi-Fi analyzer and you can download free ones on your phone, they can still find the network name. It just takes a couple of extra steps, but they do qualify that as a security feature. But if you do not broadcast it, you need to be specific when you put it in your phone. You have to put in the network name and the network, the SSID, and the password perfectly correctly. And then it will know to link to that network. Yes, Casey.
It's going to be really fun, but I can tell you right now, I've seen a lot of inappropriate ones as well.
Yes. Yes.
Like,
Yep.
really?
And I
Join if you want to get hacked.
Ones just to mess with my neighbors.
Just call your Wi-Fi. Join if you want to get hacked.
Yeah. Free viruses here.
Yeah.
It's your own.
FBI fan number 1. I have seen somebody put in van on the corner. So FBI van. So yeah, SSID channels. We talked about this earlier, 1, 6, and 11. I believe Coursera has a lab for this where you have to kind of move the channels around for the least amount of overlap. And a lot of times this will be done automatically. And it should be able to detect which ones your neighbors are using and select whichever channel is not being used. But again, don't be the jerk that's using channel 8 or channel 4, something along that. think my mentor Diego, his neighbor literally did that, and it messed up. Like he had like three Wi-Fi antennas in his house, and he could only use like 1 or 2 of them because of that. All right. Questions on this?
Kelly, I have a quick question.
Yes, sir.
On the router, what's the use of enabling the bridge? So there's a portion that says enable bridge.
Okay, so if you're enabling the bridge, like it's one of those things, like if you don't like the router or Wi-Fi antenna that your internet service provider gave you, you can bridge to a better one. So essentially, remember what a bridge does is it just changes the mode of the communication. So it comes in via cable and turns it into a network, turns it into a twisted pair. So then it turns into, that's all it does. And then it goes to your router, and then your router would actually handle the bulk of the communication. It would turn off the Wi-Fi antennas and all that stuff in the router.
Oh, okay, cool. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Yes, Madison.
Remember earlier we were talking about the 2.4 frequency band, and there was 14.
Yeah, there's 14 channels, but the total channels you can use are 1, 6, and 11.
Got it. Okay.
So
So
because
something
those are the
different.
standards, they may not list above 11.
Okay.
Is that what you're getting at?
Nope. Just wondering what was the difference from this one.
Yeah. So they may be listed 1 through 11. So it'll be 1, 6, and 11. All right. Here's another security feature with a big asterisk next to it. MAC filtering. So what is the MAC? Where have we heard that before?
The physical address of your computer.
Not your computer.
Device.
Not necessarily device. It's the
Motherboard?
The NIC.
The NIC.
NIC. So if you have a wired NIC and a wireless NIC, they're going to have different MAC addresses. So if you're operating with just a few devices on your network, like you only have 10 or 12 people or whatever, you may implement this, which is called MAC filtering, which is basically an allow list. If you are not on this list, you are denied. So you would have to input every MAC address for all the devices on your network, and then it would say, okay, only these devices are allowed on your network. Everybody else is denied. So this is kind of a security feature. However, it's not hard to figure out what somebody's MAC address is. And when you create a virtual machine, you can create a virtual machine and manually put in whatever MAC address you want. So you can do what's called spoofing a MAC address and bypass MAC filtering relatively easily. So technically a security feature, though not a really robust one. All right. Question. This is only good for a small amount of people. You don't want to be entering in MAC addresses for 1,000 computers. So questions with regards to MAC filtering. All right. Go. WPS. Oh, this is such an amazing and wonderful and convenient technology. You press one button and you're hooked up to the internet. Oh, it's so awesome. Please go into every device you have and turn this off. Do not use WPS. This is a fully hacked standard. You don't even need to push the button. They can activate it remotely. So in your router, when you're in there configuring your router, turn off WPS. If you have a printer with WPS capability, please look up in the instructions to turn off WPS. This is not something you want to have active. So it says it simplifies security configuration of a SOHO router. Security is always a balance of convenience versus security. The more convenient something is, the less secure it is. We are always trying to find that balance of what we want for our companies. So if something is extremely convenient, it is likely extremely insecure.
Why don't they remove that feature now, since it's hackable and everybody knows it can be hacked?
Because it's convenient. And it's so easy for tech support to say, yeah, just press that little button on top of your router and you're connected. Because of the convenience. NFC is near field communication. Crystal, that is something they use for like payment, stuff like that. It's usually good for a couple centimeters to an inch. It's typically how far it reaches. Like when you hold up your phone for like Apple Pay or Google Pay or whatever, that's NFC. All right. Getting close, getting close, getting close. DMZ. I gotta look. What did they rename this to? Sorry, they renamed DMZ. I'm gonna have to look this up. I can't remember what they've changed the name of DMZ. It's no longer called this. Screened subnet, is that what they call it, Eski? Thank you.
Yes, I saw
All
that
right.
in the book.
Thank you so much for that. Problem comes in, we've been calling this stuff the same thing for years. All right, so DMZ is, or secure subnet or screen subnet, is you're essentially creating an area to connect public servers to be accessed from outside your network that won't have access to the inside of your network. So when you're typing in www.google.com, do you think you're accessing the same servers that they put their research and development on? No, not at all. So what they do is they will have public facing servers and then they will have internal servers. So what they do is they create a firewall right here. They got the internet, which is my horrible depiction of a cloud. Got the line that comes in. Firewall. And then that'll come in and then you'll have it hooked up to like web servers and like email servers. And then we'll continue on. Then you'll have another set of firewalls right here. And then you would set up your internal stuff. So this would be like research and development, accounting, HR, what have you. So you're setting up essentially a dual layer system where you have public facing things that outside entities can access. Then you have internal things which cannot be from the outside. This area in the middle is called the DMZ or screened subnet.
So where is the router?
Where's the what?
The router.
You may have multiple. So you likely would have one either before or after the firewall. And then you would have one again here. So
So you
Whenever you're
configure,
connecting the network, so you likely would have a router here and here. You know, depending on your network, that's what you may do.
so the configuration of the MZ on the router would be on the first one.
Well, in large networks, you'll have multiple routers inside that network. So that's kind of where the confusion may be coming in. You have your, essentially your gateway, which is the ultimate exterior one before you get to the internet. So that would be on the edge of your network. Yes, bubble car.
So the DMZ is between the LAN and the WAN network.
No. Again, don't think of WANs or anything like this right now. Just think of this in simple terms of, you know, my company to the internet. I have like 3 web servers that I have, and then I have an email server, and then I have research and development, HR and accounting. I want to protect heavily my R&D, my accounting, and my HR. That's the most important information. So I have a firewall protecting that. I will have a much less secure firewall on the edge of my network protecting my email server and my web server that customers would be accessing. Basically, all I'm really looking for here is just trying to protect, you know, bad actors. Like if I see a denial of service attack, I can shut off that connection so that I can end that.
Okay. Thank you. And did they get that name from the DMZ, North Korea, South Korea, DMZ in the middle?
That's where that original one came from. Yes. It's that buffer in between the 2 countries. So this is the buffer between your secure information and the internet. You creating a little buffer in between. So
Cool.
screen subnet. Questions on this? All right. So other features of the DHCP, we talked about these before. Mentioned the quality of service, basically allowing you to filter, you know, or prioritize the different types of communication happening over your network. Network address translation takes an internal IP address and converts it to a publicly routable IP address. And then you have dynamic host configuration protocol, which what does that do? What does the DHCP do?
Assigns you the IP address.
IP address, what else?
DNS.
DNS, so we have IP, DNS. Anything else?
Gateway.
Default gateway.
To the
One more
MAC.
thing.
Subnet mask.
There you go, subnet mask, subnet mask, perfect. All right, we're gonna. So, extra network security. So we talked about MAC filtering, kind of security. We talked about not broadcasting our SSID, which is basically letting everybody know what our network is. And now we come back to firewalls. So we talked about 2 different types of firewalls. What were the 2 types we talked about?
Stateful.
Stateful, excellent. What does that do?
Depending on the conversation, if it comes from inside or outside of the network, it'll filter the information coming in.
Yeah. So it pays attention to the state of the conversation, but the conversation must start from inside.
I don't get the inside part. Like inside
from behind the firewall, so inside the network. Because remember, the firewalls are on the edge of our network. So what we have to do is if for the firewall to function, it's not going to allow anybody from outside to come in first. I have to scream out of the wall, and then it'll let them communicate back to me.
All right.
So that's what I mean. From inside, from behind the firewall, the conversation must start from behind it.
Okay, so I have
It
to
won't let
initiate
anybody
the
from the
conversation.
outside. Think of it like a castle. You know, like you got the firewall. You got it's like your wall around your castle. You know, I have to be inside the castle to start the communication because it won't let anybody just come in. I have to invite them in.
Okay. Oh, and then that's why you said that just because you have a firewall that's stateful and that type of protection, even if you click on something malicious, it can still get into your network.
Yes, because you've invited it in.
You invited it in. Oh man.
So that's stateful firewalls.
Yikes.
What's the other kind?
Packet filtering.
Packet filtering. Brief description.
Isn't that like basically? Oh no. We had. I don't remember what they're called. Y'all gotta help me out here.
It examines every packet of data.
Very good.
That's traffic through it.
Okay. What does it use to determine whether or not that information can go through or not?
There we go.
Datagram?
Not a datagram.
The MAC address?
Not the MAC address.
The
header?
The access and deny the access list.
ACL
and deny list.
ACL, which is also called the
access control list.
There we go. Access control list. Awesome. ACL.
Team effort. We got
definitely
that's
team effort.
The allow list and the deny list, but it's looking at each packet to make sure. And there may be extra rules put on top, like, you know, if there's any encryption that the VPN can't see, it'll auto block it. So there's things like that. All right. Other things we would do with a firewall are two things. One's called port filtering and one's called port forwarding. So port filtering is kind of like if the port isn't something that should be used by it, it will be closed. So remember, there's 65,000 ports on a computer. That's a lot of open doors for people to walk in. So if I have a web server, I might say the only ports that are allowed to be open are port 80 and what's the other one? What's my other web port?
443?
Yeah.
443, which is for what?
Secure HTTPS.
HTTPS. There you go. So those are my two, you know.
Donald, you getting fast, bro. You getting fast. I'm not liking this, man. You and Brianna coming for me, yo. I need more stickers. I need more stickers, bro.
You need more stickers.
There's enough stars next to my name. They're not enough.
So we can sit there and open and close ports and basically say, no, anything other than these, we will block. So it minimizes our vulnerability footprint, essentially. So that's kind of what port filtering is. Port forwarding is kind of when you receive a request for communication from like a specific computer, the request will be allowed to be forwarded to another computer. So say I have a web camera in my house and I wasn't silly enough to have it go through Amazon servers with Ring or Blink or any of those things. I want that in my control because that's a camera in my house. So I set it up. Well, most internet capable cameras operate off of port 80 or 443, but that's too easy to figure out because that's going to be the first things they go to. So what I could say is my gateway router, I put in the IP address for my gateway router, but then I put some weird port number like port number 8265. I put that in. And if that port is pinged on my router, it will forward that traffic onto that webcam so I would have access to it. So that's what port forwarding is. And that way I'm not leaving a well-known port like port 80 open on my home router. So it allows you to kind of forward that traffic.
So Kelly, it's like if you have all your like if you think of your network as a house, and you have all your well-known ports, the stuff like the ports you'd have to study, and then you have the like the port that you just said, just a random port would basically be like a hidden like a speakeasy something like that. A place where you can hide traffic from somebody that might see.
Yeah.
It's like Dexter's lab, essentially. It's there. It's a part of the floor plan, but nobody knows that it's there because they're not Dexter.
Or people may not think to look there because it takes time. You know, doing a port scan may take some time.
Yeah.
And you alert people when you do a port scan. If they know anything about security, when somebody's doing a port scan on you, it alerts you immediately.
Right.
So that's when you would pick one of these, what they call ephemeral ports. They have common ports, well-known ports, and then they have what are called ephemeral ports. And that's the higher ports, like above 25,000 or something like that. It's all those ports are basically can be used for almost anything.
This is still 1101.
Huh?
This is still 1101.
They briefly mention it. Sorry. Trying not to get too far in the weeds. Anyway, so basically that's what port forwarding does is you pick a random port and then you can use it to go to another area. There's something else that's called port triggering, which is like, and this is why, you know, FTP, we have 2 ports. What are our 2 ports for FTP?
20 and 21.
20 and 21. There's a specific reason for this. So when I communicate to a computer on port 20, it tends to respond on 21. So it's not responding on the exact same port. So we need to set up what's called a port trigger, which is like when I communicate out on port 20, it goes ahead and opens up port 21, waiting on that response. So port forwarding and port triggering. Port forwarding is basically you use a specific port as you're coming into your network to forward it to a designated computer or device. Makes it
Can you
easier.
explain what port triggering is again?
Port triggering. So port triggering, you know, like I said, FTP uses port 20 and 21. So if I forgot my files and I'm away on a business trip and I forgot my file on my home computer and I'm at work and, oh, there we go, 1024, there you go. And I have to like send a request to my home computer to send me that file. So I send the request over port 20. And once that goes out of the firewall, it sees that a file transfer protocol request has been made on port 20. Then it knows at that moment it needs to open 21 to receive the response. But it was my action to communicate through the first door to open the second.
So you triggered it.
Yes. So the communication triggered it to open another port.
I learned it as data and control. Like one was mine.
So does the protocol need to have 2 ports for that to happen?
Does what?
So you use FTP as an example.
Yes.
Is there another thing that would is there another protocol that would need 1 port or 2 ports? Does it matter how many ports there
There's
are,
another-
or can it
there's
be
another
triggered
one.
on the same port?
I'm sending a communication out 543 and it may respond on something else. You know, there's other protocols that may do it. FTP is just the most, like the easiest example you can use.
There's
Okay.
DHCP and Simple Network Management Protocol too. They use 2 ports. But when I see when I'm looking at what I wrote down, it says 20 is used for data and 21 is used for the control. So 21 controls the flow, and port 20 is where you send the data through. Because FTP. That's because I wrote
Sorry, I don't
down
have my headphones, so I'm gonna need you to repeat. I apologize.
Oh, FTP is it says that port 20 is data and port 21 is control. That's
There you
what
go.
I wrote. So
Yeah.
so you send data through port 20 and 21 controls the flow of data?
Well, 21 would be like the control of what you want to come through, and it could be also the confirmation you received.
Okay, there we go.
So like 20 is like you knocking on the door, and 21 is like you open it up to send somebody out or whoever it is that they're requesting to come through, right? Is that how it is?
Yeah, you know, or you know, you head out the front door to get your car, and then it opens the garage door automatically, so you can pull it in.
Oh, Got it. So it just, yeah, it's like a gateway pretty much.
Yeah.
Is that how people remotely access your webcams and stuff through different ports that aren't locked?
Yes, and they may use ports in a way in which they're not intended to get access to it. But yes, that's exactly how they do it. If you're not locking up your ports, they can get access to it. And once they get in, they can, one of the easiest things to get access to is a camera. Dude, they have like Tor sites where you can literally go and just like randomly click on people's computers. They just set them once they get in, they
so
set them
weird.
up to where you can literally just go and watch people's cameras. It's messed up. Which is why a camera cover, but they also do it for microphones too, things like that.
Or just plug it out, you know what I'm saying? So you don't want to put a
Brianna, you
cover
lock your
on.
ports through your firewall. That's where that port filtering goes, where you can close off all ports that you're not using.
So can that triggering happen between just one port number?
Well, yeah.
So like
Well, what do you mean? Like, so if I go out 20, it comes back 20?
Yeah.
Well, you wouldn't set it up that way because it would be anticipating that through a stateful connection.
Okay.
So you would need port triggering set up in case it didn't, like the protocol didn't act in that way. So you would to be able to allow it to communicate back. Like
Okay. Gotcha.
All right. And then the all important VPN, which creates an encrypted tunnel to hide your communication. And there can be half and full tunnels. So pay attention to what kind you're using. Many enterprise organizations will set this up so that you appear to the servers as if you're on site, even if you're working remotely. So you would have access to all the resources. You can get it past use it to get past what are called region locks. Like may not be able to see certain material in Florida, but in New York you can. So I can set my VPN to show me in New York, and then I can see that material, or in a different country or what have you. All right, questions on that? All right. Installation problems. As always, the first thing you should check your documentation on the router. If you're unable to log into your Wi-Fi, make sure your SSID and password are correct and they're not set for defaults, because if you have your router password set to a default, it's super easy to look it up. I just showed you all a website where you literally can look up the brand and model and it'll give you the password. And what's interesting is if it gives an SSID, you can even search the SSID and it'll tell you the exact brand and model of router that's being used. So if you're still using the generic name on your router and you haven't changed the passwords, people can easily get in and change the stuff for you. You want to check your connection. If you're not able to connect to a web address, try pinging a well-known address. The one I always recommend is Google's DNS server, which is 8.8.8.8. It's the easiest one to remember. Ping that address and then ping www.google.com. If you get responses on both of them, you have a clean internet connection. So you use the command prompt to do that, and it's easy. Just type ping space 8.8.8.8 or ping space www.google.com. You want to see every network connection you have, ipconfig space /all, and that should give you everything on your computer, all your wired and wireless NICs, their connection status, your MAC addresses, and then your fun stuff from your DHCP, all that stuff. All right. Common connectivity issues, update your drivers, both for your computer and for your routers. If you're working with your standard ISP's router, they tend to update this on a regular basis, but that doesn't necessarily mean they will. If you see in a PIPA or a link local address assigned, it means something is wrong. And then you can start pinging things, like you can ping you see if you can ping something that's known on your network, like another phone, or if you're using Wi-Fi or a printer or something like that, some other known address inside your network, see if you can ping it. If it responds, then you ping your gateway. So you start from the closest point, which is you, loop back. My NIC works, beautiful. Next, can I ping something on my network? Printer, boom, it responds. Yes, all right, next. Can I ping my gateway? Does it respond? Yes. Okay. Can I ping Google? Does it respond? Yes. Okay. So my internet's fine. Something else is going. But usually if you see in a PIPA, the simplest thing that is somebody went and changed your IP address to static, and there wasn't one in there. So you go in there, you click it from static to dynamic, it'll re-request a IP address, and you tend to be good from there.
So where would you input that ping thing? So you do ping and then the
You would do
IP
that in the
address,
command line or terminal.
command line
Oh.
or terminal?
Yeah, or PowerShell. You can do it in there too. But yeah, you would go there and then you would just literally type in your C prompt, ping space IP addresses. We'll get into command line commands pretty soon.
All right.
Address conflicts. If two people on the same network are operating with the same IP, it will be intermittent communication. Only one of you can talk at a time. That typically only happens if somebody statically puts in their IP address and then somebody else receives that lease from the DHCP server. If this happens, we'll go over this again in command prompt, but you would go into your command prompt and then you would do IP config space release. And that gives up your IP. And then IP config space renew, and it will give you a new one. Make sure you do it in that order, because if you renew then release, you won't have an IP. But again, we haven't gotten to command line yet. We will. That's just kind of a preview as to what's happening. And I know y'all are thinking, please tell me there is somewhere we can practice this.
Webs.
There we go. Test out. Tons of exciting labs. Yes, Ramon.
So if you have a DNS connection problem on, let's say, my laptop, that would be something I try to get a new connection.
If there's a DNS connection problem, it may be that your DNS server is down. Usually that's why when you're putting it in, they ask for 2. So in case one is down, it'll go to a backup. But if you're not able to communicate with DNS, you can always go in and replace it with Google's DNS, and then that will get you going, which is that 8.8.8.8. But that does happen from time to time where a DNS server goes down and it's not able to communicate, where it can't resolve IP addresses. And that would be if you ping the IP and it comes back and you're good, but you try to ping the web address, the www.google.com, and it does not come back, that's a DNS problem. It means it's not communicating with your DNS. Again, we will get into all of this. So I'm getting some deer in headlight looks. We will get into this. So I get it. All right. Some common Wi-Fi errors can be fixed by turning on and off the computer. If you put the router in a place where it's going to get interference, like next to the microwave or next to a wireless phone, because they will operate off of similar bandwidths and they will interrupt your Wi-Fi. If you're on the opposite side of the wall from somebody who's operating on the same channel as you, that will interfere with it. So you can change the channel. What are the 3 channels we can use?
111.16.
1611.
1,
1,
6, and 11.
6,
Oh,
11.
1,
Very good.
11, and 6.
1, 6, 11. There you go. So if you're on channel 6, you're getting a lot of interference, switch over to channel 1, you might clear it all up. Place your router in a higher position. Don't put it on the floor. On the floor, it may not communicate well. Put it up a little bit higher in the room. It may help with your signal. Entering in the wrong SSID or password may interfere. If the SSID is not being broadcast, if you're trying to log into it the first time, you may not see it. And that can be a problem. And then finally, your device may be too far from the antenna and needs to move closer. That's the vast majority, like 90% of your wireless issues fall right into these camps. All right. Okay, this was the slide I was telling you about. You may want to take a screenshot of this because it kind of summarizes that Wi-Fi 802.11 standard pretty good. You don't need to worry about the year it was adopted, but it gives you the frequency, the speed, the range. They don't typically ask about that in A+. That's more of a Net Plus standard. Understood, Cynthia. See, I thought I was being slick when I first got my router. Before I got into this program and started doing this stuff, I had a ottoman that opened up and had a little cubby hole in there, and I was like, I don't want that ugly router just hanging out on the shelf. So I literally put the ottoman up against the wall and put ran the wires up underneath it and put it inside that ottoman and had horrible signal and couldn't figure out what was going on. Too much interference. But I learned. All right. With that, I will stop torturing you. We have now reached the end. We should now be able to compare and contrast some internet connection types like ISDN, DSL, POTS, satellite, Wi-Fi, all that fun stuff. We should be able to compare and contrast the standards of encryption. What are our 3 basic standards of encryption for Wi-Fi? Let's see here. Sure, Amaya, can you give me one Wi-Fi encryption standard, please? If you're talking, you're on mute. There we go.
Can you repeat?
Yes, can you give me one wireless encryption standard?
DMZ.
DMZ. We do use firewalls for that, and I imagine encryption is involved. We're getting closer, not quite there. See here. Good try though. Good try.
VPN.
What? What was that, Amanda?
VPN.
A VPN does use encryption, but we have actual encryption standards. One of them used a static key. Let's see here. We have the static key. Let's see here. Rena, can you give me one, please?
WEP.
WEP. WEP. WEP. What does that stand for?
It stands for Wired Equivalent Privacy.
There you go. So WEP uses that static key. Anybody want to give us the next one? Huh?
Worst encryption possible.
Worst encryption. There you go. That's a good way to remember it, actually. So let's see here. Galen, can you give me another one? Two, three.
I'm sorry, what did you say, Kelly? Sorry about that.
The wireless encryption protocol. We have 3 of them. Rena just gave us WEP, W-E-P. Can you give us another?
Wireless encryption protocol. I'm sorry.
No problem.
I have my notes. It's just everything's all mixed. Everything's all like cluttered up on my computer.
It was a lot today.
Yeah, I'm trying to get to my desktop. I don't even know how to get to my desktop. Yeah.
No worries. No worries.
Can I just take like the next one?
No problem. No problem, Kaylee. Bubble power, what you got?
I'll take the next one. Let me get to my desktop.
Call my name,
Yes, sir. What was another wireless encryption protocol for us?
the WAP, WAP.
Not quite. You know,
Is not the WAP. The WAP
WAP. What does WAP stand for? WAP, W-A-P.
is Wi-Fi protected access.
That's WPA. There we go. Yes.
Yeah, WPA. That's what I was saying. I'm sorry.
There you go. WPA. Yes. There we go. That's our next one. And that should easily lead us into the one after that, which is what?
WPA2.
WPA2. Excellent. These will come up repeatedly, so we'll talk about them a lot. Talked about the role between wired and wireless routers, how to install them, the common pitfalls, and then how to address that. Any questions?
Okay, is there a WPA3 too?
I believe there is now, yes.
Yeah, I've seen one WPA3. Set on my router.
I feel so naked right now. Like I'm like really, I want to almost tackle the router situation right now, but
Give it. Yeah, we'll get there. Well, yeah. What is our homework for tonight? Reiterate. What is our homework for tonight?
configure.
Change your default passcode.
Mess up your router. Messing up your
Mess up
router.
Break my internet.
Yeah.
Throw
Go
our
ahead and
routers out the
put
window.
a secure sign-in and password for your router. So log
might
in.
not
I'm
be-
going to drop the two links for the default sign-ins and passwords for all different kind of router types, and then I will put in the router emulator where you can select it and kind of play around with settings and stuff like that. All right. That's it.